February 19th, 1945, 0900 hours. Off the coast of Iwo Jima, the landing ship rocks in the Pacific swell. Inside the steel belly, black Marines stand shoulder to shoulder. Their faces glisten with sweat despite the morning cold. Above them, the sky roars with naval bombardment. 16-inch shells scream overhead, pounding the volcanic island ahead. Through the open ramp, they see it, Iwo Jima. 8 square miles of black sand and death. Mount Suribachi rises like a broken tooth against the sky. Smoke pours from its slopes. The smell of sulfur drifts across the water, sharp and sulfuric, mixing with diesel and salt. These men wear the same uniform as their white counterparts. They carry the same rifles. They face the same enemy, but they do not receive the same respect. The ramp begins to lower. Seawater sprays across their boots. Ahead, the beach is already chaos. Explosions erupt in geysers of black sand. Tracers arc through the smoke. Men scream orders that barely carry over the noise. A white officer glances back at them. His expression says what his mouth won't. Can they hold under fire? The Japanese have already decided. In their propaganda, they call them inferior, weak, unreliable. Both are about to learn otherwise. To understand what brought these men to this volcanic hellscape, we must step back, not just to the war, but to the country they left behind. America in 1942 was not one nation. It was two. In the South, Jim Crow laws dictated where black Americans could sit, eat, drink, learn, and live. Separate water fountains, separate schools, separate entrances to buildings they helped construct. Lynchings still occurred with sickening regularity. Nearly 5,000 black Americans murdered between 1882 and 1968. Many in the decade before the war. In the North, segregation wore a subtler mask. No signs on the doors, but the doors stayed closed. Redlining kept black families in certain neighborhoods. Unions blocked them from factory jobs. Police brutality went unpunished. This was the country asking black men to fight fascism abroad. The United States Marine Corps had an even clearer position. No black Marines. None. Not one had served since the Revolutionary War. The Marines considered themselves an elite force. They believed allowing black men to serve would dilute that status. When war came in December 1941, the Corps maintained its absolute color line. But pressure was building. Civil rights leaders like A. Philip Randolph threatened mass protests in Washington. President Franklin D. Roosevelt, needing national unity for total war, issued Executive Order 8802 in June 1941. It banned racial discrimination in the defense industry and federal government. The military fell under scrutiny. The Navy relented first, though barely. Black men could enlist, but only in the steward's branch, serving food, cleaning quarters for white officers. The Coast Guard began accepting black recruits in modest numbers. The Army maintained segregated units, but expanded black enlistment. The Marines held out until June 1942. When the order finally came, it was not born from moral conviction. It was logistics. The Corps needed bodies for an expanding Pacific War. On June 25, 1942, the Marine Corps announced it would begin accepting black recruits. The number 1,000 men, out of an entire corps. They would train at Montford Point, North Carolina, a patch of swampland adjacent to Camp Lejeune. Separate from white Marines, separate facilities, separate everything. Even the drill instructors, all white initially, had volunteered for the assignment. Some came with good intentions, others came with contempt barely concealed. The black men who arrived at Montford Point carried a double burden. They had to prove themselves as Marines, and they had to prove themselves as men in a nation that questioned both. The Pittsburgh Courier, a leading black newspaper, captured their mission in February 1942, the WWII campaign. 2 victories, one against the Axis powers enslaving Europe and Asia, one against the racism enslaving black Americans at home. Young black men enlisted knowing the odds. They would face the enemy abroad and prejudice at home. Germany and Japan both broadcast propaganda targeting them, asking why they fought for a country that treated them as less than human. Tokyo Rose's voice crackled across Pacific airwaves. "Why are you fighting for the white man?" But they came anyway. Thousands applied. Thousands were rejected for arbitrary reasons. Those who made it through found themselves in a military that needed them, but didn't want them. That required their labor, but doubted their courage. That would send them into hell, but question whether they belonged. Montford Point became more than a training camp. It became a crucible. The first recruit arrived at Montford Point on August 26, 1942. His name was Howard P. Perry. He stepped off the bus into humid Carolina heat and mosquito-thick air. Within weeks, hundreds followed. They called themselves the Montford Point Marines. The name carried pride and defiance. The training was deliberately harder than standard Marine boot camp. White drill instructors, many from the South, pushed them beyond regulation limits. Longer runs, more push-ups, harsher punishments for minor infractions. The unofficial message was clear: you have to be twice as good to be considered half as worthy. So they became twice as good. They mastered rifle drills until their movements were mechanical perfection. They ran obstacle courses in record times. They learned amphibious assault tactics, supply chain logistics, and battlefield communications. But when graduation came, their assignments revealed the Corps' true intentions. No combat infantry roles. No rifle companies. No machine gun battalions. Instead, ammunition and depot companies. Stevedore units. Supply handlers. The unglamorous, back-breaking work of keeping a military fed, armed, and moving. The official reasoning was lack of experience and supporting roles better suited to their capabilities. The unspoken truth was fear. Fear of how white America would react to black Marines in combat. Fear of what it meant if they succeeded. Fear of the questions it would raise about segregation itself. Yet these roles, dismissed as non-combat, were anything but safe. Ammunition handlers worked under fire. Depot companies unloaded supplies on contested beaches while mortars rained down. Supply lines were constant targets. The enemy didn't care about your job classification when they pulled the trigger. Across the ocean, Axis propagandists sharpened their knives. German radio broadcasts in English told black soldiers they were cannon fodder for white supremacists. Japanese leaflets dropped over Pacific positions showed lynchings in America alongside text, "Is this the freedom you fight for?" Tokyo Rose's broadcasts grew more sophisticated, mixing American jazz with poison. Your women are with white men while you die for their country. Some of it landed. How could it not? These men had lived the contradictions their entire lives. But propaganda underestimated something crucial. Fighting for a flawed country was still fighting for their country, for their families, for the future they intended to change. By late 1944, over 19,000 black Marines had trained at Montford Point. They deployed across the Pacific, Saipan, Guam, Peleliu. They worked the docks. They hauled ammunition through machine gun fire. They drove trucks along roads targeted by snipers. They earned Purple Hearts and Bronze Stars, though rarely headlines. Then came Iwo Jima. The island sat 660 miles from Tokyo. Japanese forces had turned it into a fortress, 11 miles of tunnels, 1,500 rooms carved into volcanic rock, interlocking fields of fire designed to kill every man who touched the beach. The U.S. needed it desperately. B-29 bombers flying from the Marianas to Japan required emergency landing sites. Iwo Jima was the answer. The assault would require everything the Marines had, including men they doubted. In January 1945, black Marines from the 8th Ammunition Company, 36th Depot Company, and 38th Depot Company boarded transport ships. They sailed west toward a volcanic island they'd never heard of. They carried crates of ammunition, medical supplies, rations, and water. They knew their job: keep the front lines supplied. They didn't know they were about to redefine what black Marines could do. The island appeared on the horizon February 19th. Black sand beaches, sulfur smoke, and 21,000 Japanese soldiers waiting in the dark. To understand what happened next, we must look at this battle from multiple angles: the human, the tactical, the racial, the enemy's view, and the impossible choices these men faced. Private First Class Archibald Mosley stepped onto that landing craft with a photograph in his breast pocket. His mother, standing outside their sharecropper's shack in Alabama. He'd enlisted in 1943 despite her tears, despite white neighbors telling him he'd die for nothing, despite the recruiting officer who made him wait outside in the rain while white recruits signed papers indoors. He was 21 years old. Sergeant Timerlate Curvin, a squad leader in the 36th Depot Company, had worked as a Pullman porter before the war. He'd smiled through 1,000 slurs, pocketed tips from men who wouldn't shake his hand. At Montford Point, he found something different. Authority. Respect from the men under his command. A rifle that made him equal to any enemy. He led his squad with precision that came from years of swallowing dignity and converting it into discipline. Corporal William Bracey had been a college student, intelligent, articulate. In another America, he might have been an officer. Instead, he loaded ammunition crates and dodged the question his mother asked in every letter. When are they going to let you really fight? These men weren't abstractions. They were sons, brothers, fathers. They had left behind communities that depended on them, families that feared for them, and a country that wasn't sure they were fully human. Yet they stood in those landing crafts, watching an island burn, ready to do a job that would put them directly in the kill zone. Military historians often focus on riflemen, the men who take hills and clear bunkers. But modern warfare runs on logistics. Without ammunition, rifles are clubs. Without supplies, armies starve. Without medical equipment, wounded men die. Black Marines were the ammunition chain. The 8th Ammunition Company alone carried the responsibility of getting thousands of tons of ordnance from ships to front lines. Mortar shells, machine gun belts, rifle cartridges, hand grenades, flamethrower fuel, explosive charges. Every bullet fired by a Marine on Iwo Jima passed through their hands first. The process was brutally simple and lethally dangerous. LSTs and cargo ships anchored offshore, unable to beach due to Japanese artillery. Smaller landing craft ferried supplies to the beach. Black Marines formed human chains, man to man, crate to crate, moving ammunition inland while enemy fire raked the sand. No cover, no brakes, no margin for error. If the ammunition stopped, the advance stopped. If the advance stopped, men died. The entire operation hinged on these support troops maintaining a flow of material under conditions designed to kill them. One Marine historian later wrote, "The ammunition handlers were more exposed than most infantrymen. Infantrymen could take cover. Ammunition handlers had to stand in the open, moving crates that would explode if hit. Japanese artillery zeroed in on supply dumps. Mortars targeted landing zones. Snipers aimed for anyone carrying something valuable. Japanese intelligence officers had studied America's racial divisions carefully. They knew about lynchings. They knew about segregation. They believed it was a fatal weakness." In briefings before Iwo Jima, some Japanese commanders specifically noted the presence of black support units. Their assessment: troops of inferior morale and questionable loyalty. Men who would break under pressure. Soldiers who might even surrender rather than die for a country that oppressed them. This analysis appeared in captured documents after the battle. Japanese officers expected white Marines to fight fanatically. They'd seen it at Tarawa and Saipan. But black Marines? The assumption was they'd be the weak point. Target them and the supply line collapses. Collapse the supply line, and the invasion fails. It was a catastrophic misunderstanding. The Japanese hadn't accounted for something beyond their cultural framework. These men had been proving themselves their entire lives. Every day in America was a battle against doubt. Every achievement came with twice the effort. They'd developed a resilience that didn't show in intelligence reports. The propaganda that might have demoralized white troops, accusations of fighting for oppressors, landed differently on black Marines. They already knew America was flawed. They were fighting anyway, not for the America that existed, but for the America that could exist. Sergeant Major Edgar Huff stood on that beach as the highest-ranking black Marine in the Corps. He'd earned his rank through relentless competence. Now he coordinated ammunition distribution across multiple companies, directing traffic in hell. Under fire, he moved between units. Reorganized supply routes when Japanese artillery destroyed the first ones. Pulled wounded men from the surf while maintaining operational tempo. White officers who doubted him watched him work with a blend of admiration and discomfort. Staff Sergeant Timerlate Curvin faced a moment that defined leadership. His squad was pinned by mortar fire near a supply dump. Staying meant death. Leaving meant abandoning tons of ammunition the front lines desperately needed. He ordered half his men to move the supplies in sprints between explosions. The other half provided cover fire. They lost 2 men. They saved the ammunition. The advance continued. These were the decisions no training manual covered. Leadership under fire, with inadequate support, while carrying the weight of representing an entire race. Private James Davis, loading ammunition on D-Day, thought about his hometown in Georgia. 3 months before shipping out, he'd been denied service at a diner. The owner had spat on the ground near his feet. Now he was risking his life so that same man remained free to spit on him. This was the psychological warfare no enemy could match. Every black Marine carried it, the knowledge that heroism might not change anything, that they could die on this beach and still be buried in segregated cemeteries, that their families would mourn them in churches white Americans wouldn't enter, yet they moved forward. Crate after crate, hour after hour. The moral calculus was impossible and simple at once. Change required presence. You couldn't transform what you weren't part of. Every black Marine on Iwo Jima was forcing America to see them, to acknowledge them, to reckon with the contradiction of asking men to die for freedoms they didn't possess. Tokyo Rose's voice asked why they fought. The answer was in every step they took inland, every round they delivered, every brother they refused to leave behind. The climax was building. The moment when doubt would meet reality, and only one would survive. February 19th, 1945, 09:02 hours. Beach Red 1, the ramp drops. Private First Class Archibald Mosley steps into waist-deep water. The ocean is cold. The weight of his pack tries to drag him under. Around him, men push forward through the surf. The naval bombardment has stopped. For 3 days, American warships pounded this island. The beach should be clear. It isn't. The first mortar round hits 50 yards to his left. Black sand erupts in a fountain. The explosion is felt more than heard. A pressure wave that punches the chest. Men disappear in the spray, then the machine guns open up. Japanese gunners had waited, hidden in caves, concealed in bunkers carved into the terraced slopes. They'd let the Marines get close. Now they unleash hell. Tracers cut lines through the morning light. Men fall in the surf. The water turns pink, then red. Mosley reaches the beach and throws himself flat. The black volcanic sand is unlike anything he's touched. Coarse, loose, impossible to dig into. Boots sink with every step. Running feels like drowning on land. Behind him, the 36th Depot Company is landing. Their LCVPs hit the beach in staggered waves. Ramps drop and men pour out, carrying ammunition crates marked with yellow stencils, explosives. Each crate weighs 60 pounds. Each man carries 2. A mortar round lands directly in an ammunition stockpile. The explosion levels everything within 50 yards. Marines are thrown like dolls. The concussion tears through the beach. Shrapnel rips through men still in the water. The screaming starts immediately. Corporal William Bracey sees his squad leader cut in half by machine gun fire. No time to process it. No time to mourn. He takes command, starts shouting orders. The mission hasn't changed. Get the ammunition inland. They form a human chain, man to man, hand to hand, passing crates from the landing craft to improvised dumps behind the first terrace. Japanese mortars adjust their aim. Shells walk across the beach, searching. Each explosion throws sand high enough to blot out the sun. Men work through it. When someone falls, another Marine takes his place. Sergeant Timerlake Curvin organizes his squad into rotation. 20 minutes moving ammunition, 10 minutes in cover. Not because it's safer, there is no safe, but because exhaustion kills as surely as bullets. His men move like machines, faces blank, eyes focused on the crate in front of them. If they think about what they're doing, they'll freeze. A white lieutenant from a rifle company stumbles back from the front line, bleeding from his shoulder. He sees the depot companies working and stops. Later, in his after-action report, he writes, "I watched Negro Marines move ammunition under fire heavier than anything I experienced in the assault. They never hesitated, never broke. I will never doubt their courage again." But recognition comes later. Right now, only survival matters. By noon, over 30,000 Marines are ashore. 8,000 tons of supplies are piling up on the beach. Japanese artillery has the range dialed in. Every landing zone is a kill box. Black Marines dig frantically, trying to disperse ammunition before an enemy shell turns it into a secondary explosion that will kill dozens. Private James Davis is moving mortar shells when he hears the distinctive whistle of incoming artillery. He has maybe 2 seconds. He could dive for cover. Instead, he shoves 2 Marines away from the impact zone. The shell lands where he was standing. They find his body 3 hours later, still holding a crate. February 20th, 1945, Day 2. The beach is a graveyard of metal and men. Wrecked landing craft lean at broken angles. Equipment lies scattered in the sand. The smell is already unbearable. Cordite, blood, diesel, and death mixing with volcanic sulfur. The 8th Ammunition Company has been working for 36 hours straight. No sleep, no relief. Marines at the front are burning through ammunition faster than anyone predicted. Every pillbox requires satchel charges. Every cave needs flamethrowers. Every yard costs bullets. Staff Sergeant Edgar Huff coordinates resupply under fire that hasn't stopped since H hour. He's lost count of how many men he's seen killed. White officers keep approaching him with the same expression, surprised that his companies haven't broken, that they're functioning at all. He wants to ask them, "What did you expect?" Instead, he directs another convoy of ammunition inland. The path is marked by bodies they don't have time to move. Corporal William Bracey's hands are raw and bleeding. The rough wooden crates have shredded his gloves, then his skin. He wraps them in torn cloth and keeps working. Around him, his squad, what's left of it, moves like zombies. Exhaustion has pushed past pain into something else, a mechanical state where the body moves and the mind goes elsewhere. A Japanese sniper targets their position. 3 rounds crack past in seconds. One catches a Marine named Samuel Jenkins in the throat. He drops the ammunition crate he's carrying. Bracey drags him behind a disabled half-track. Applies pressure to the wound. Watches the light fade from Jenkins's eyes. Bracey picks up the crate Jenkins dropped. Delivers it, February 23rd, 1945, Day 5, 10:20 hours. Marines fight their way up Mount Suribachi's slopes. The volcanic cone dominates the southern end of the island. Take it, and you control observation of the beaches. The Japanese know this. Every foot is contested. Black Marines from the 8th and 36th Companies have been hauling ammunition, water, and medical supplies up that slope for 2 days. The terrain is nearly vertical in places. Loose volcanic rock slides under boots. Japanese defenders roll grenades down from above. Snipers fire from caves invisible until you're past them. At 10:20 hours, a patrol from Easy Company reaches the summit. They carry a small American flag. Someone finds a length of pipe. They raise it. Below, on the beaches, men stop and stare. Black Marines loading ammunition see it. That small flag snapping in the wind. Some of them cry. Not from joy, there's too much death for that, but from something simpler. Proof. Proof they're winning. Proof the island can be taken. 3 hours later, a larger flag goes up. 40 Marines strain to lift it. The photograph becomes iconic, 6 men raising the stars and stripes on Suribachi's peak. What the photograph doesn't show, the ammunition that got those Marines there, the water that kept them alive, the medical supplies that saved the wounded. Every bullet fired to take that hill passed through the hands of men the Marine Corps hadn't wanted. The battle is far from over. Iwo Jima will grind on for another month. But something shifts on February 23rd. In the exhausted faces of white Marines, in the reports sent back to command, in the grudging acknowledgement that maybe, just maybe, courage doesn't require white skin. By week's end, the 36th Depot Company has suffered 40% casualties. The 8th Ammunition Company has lost 30 men killed, twice that wounded. They've moved over 15,000 tons of supplies under fire. They've worked through artillery barrages that sent infantry diving for cover. They've continued operations when white officers said it was impossible. Sergeant Timerlate Curvin, blood-soaked and hollow-eyed, receives orders to pull his squad back for rest. They've been on the line for 6 days straight. He gathers his men, the survivors anyway, and leads them to a rear area that's still within artillery range. A white Marine from a rifle company approaches him. Young, maybe 19. His rifle is clean, but his eyes are empty. He says, "You guys saved my life 3 times. Every time we ran dry, you brought more ammo. I didn't think—" He trails off. Curvin waits. "I didn't think you'd do it," the kid finishes. "I'm sorry." Curvin nods once. Too tired for anger? Too numb for vindication. The flag on Suribachi snaps in the wind. Below it, Black Marines continue working. The battle isn't about proving themselves anymore. It's about finishing the job. about honoring the brothers who already died doing it. The aftermath would tell the full story, the numbers, the recognition, the slow change in a nation's conscience. But the turning point happened here, in the black sand and sulfur smoke, when doubt met determination, and determination won. March 26, 1945. 0900 hours, Iwo Jima secured. The island falls silent. 36 days of continuous combat, and not with celebration but exhaustion. American forces declare Iwo Jima secured. The word feels hollow to men who've walked through hell. The numbers tell one story. 26,000 American casualties. Nearly 7,000 dead. The Japanese garrison of 21,000 men virtually annihilated, only 216 taken prisoner. Iwo Jima has the highest casualty rate of any Marine Corps battle in history. 1 in 3 Marines who landed is killed or wounded, but numbers hide the texture of loss. The 8th Ammunition Company lands with 150 men. They leave with 103, 47 killed or wounded, a casualty rate higher than most infantry units. The 36th Depot Company suffers similar losses. The 38th Depot Company loses 31 men. These are the support troops, who supposedly weren't in combat. The beach where they worked is now a monument to industrial warfare. Wrecked vehicles stretch for miles. Shell craters overlap until the original terrain is unrecognizable. The black sand is stained darker with blood that won't wash away. Bulldozers push debris into piles that include pieces of men no one can identify. Staff Sergeant Edgar Huff walks that beach in late March. He's survived. Many he led didn't. He finds the spot where Private James Davis died, saving 2 Marines. Someone has placed a helmet on a rifle stuck in the sand. No name. Just one marker among thousands. The recognition comes slowly, then suddenly. Major General Graves B. Erskine, commanding the 3rd Marine Division, issues a commendation. It's formal, military, but the words cut through decades of doubt. Negro Marines are no longer on trial. They are Marines, period. Lieutenant General Holland Smith, overall commander of Expeditionary Forces, writes in his report, "The Negro Marines, under the most trying conditions of combat, performed with courage and efficiency. They have earned the right to wear the Marine uniform. These statements matter because of who's making them. These are not politicians courting votes or activists pushing agendas. These are combat commanders who measure men by one metric, performance under fire. Awards begin filtering through. Bronze Stars, Purple Hearts. Navy Commendation Medals. Not enough, never enough, but more than black servicemen typically received. Sergeant Timerlate Curvin receives the Bronze Star for leadership under fire. Corporal William Bracey is promoted to sergeant, one of the first black Marines to receive battlefield promotion on merit alone. The citations read, like every other combat medal, for heroic achievement under heavy enemy fire, maintaining supply lines critical to mission success, disregard for personal safety. What they don't say. These men did it while carrying the weight of an entire race's reputation, while knowing that failure would be attributed to their skin color, not individual circumstance, while understanding that white Marines failing the same mission would be seen as unlucky, but black Marines failing would be seen as proof. They didn't fail. Back in the United States, the WWII campaign newspapers seized the story. The Pittsburgh Courier runs photographs of black Marines on Iwo Jima. The headline, "Marines Prove Valor Has No Color." The Chicago Defender interviews families of fallen black Marines, elevating their sacrifice to the national stage. But the most significant impact happens quietly, in classified military briefings. The Marine Corps begins internal reviews of its segregation policies. Officers who commanded black units submit reports that contradict decades of institutional racism. The data is irrefutable. Black Marines performed as well as white Marines when given the opportunity. In some metrics, discipline, initiative, resilience, they exceeded standards. The question military planners now face: how do you maintain segregation when combat proves it baseless? April 1945, returning home. The first black Marines rotate off Iwo Jima in early April. They board transport ships still caked in volcanic ash. Many carry wounds, some visible, others buried deep. They expect something: recognition, change, a shift in how America sees them. What they find is depressingly familiar. At Pearl Harbor, they're separated from white Marines. Different barracks, different mess halls, segregation enforced even among men who bled together. When they reach California, black Marines are loaded onto different buses for the journey to Camp Pendleton. The buses drive through the same America they left. Sergeant Timerlate Curvin, Bronze Star pinned to his chest, is refused service at a diner in Texas. He's still in uniform. The medal means nothing. The waitress looks through him like he's glass. Corporal William Bracy returns to his hometown in Louisiana. He walks down Main Street in his dress blues. An old white man spits at his feet and mutters a slur. Bracy keeps walking. He's survived Iwo Jima. He can survive this. But something has changed, even if it's invisible. The men who fought on that island, black and white, carry the knowledge that segregation failed its first real test. They saw who broke and who held. They know what courage looks like, and it doesn't match what they'd been taught. White Marines begin speaking up. Not all, not even most, but enough. In letters to families, in conversations at VFW halls, in quiet moments of reflection. They tell the truth. Black Marines fought as hard as anyone, bled as red, died as brave. The military can ignore ideology. It cannot ignore operational reality. July 1948. Executive Order 9981. President Harry S. Truman signs the order that begins the end. It is hereby declared to be the policy of the President that there shall be equality of treatment and opportunity for all persons in the armed services without regard to race, color, religion, or national origin. The order is met with fierce resistance from senior officers. Some threaten resignation. Others predict catastrophe. They claim integration will destroy unit cohesion, lower standards, create chaos. But Iwo Jima and a dozen other battles have already provided the counter-argument. The Marine Corps begins integration in 1949, slowly, reluctantly, but irreversibly. The Montford Point Marines become a footnote in official histories. Their separate training camp closing in 1949 as integration takes hold. For decades, their contribution is minimized. They appear in no major films, few books. They become invisible again, but not forgotten. The men who served remember. Their families remember. The communities they return to remember. And slowly recognition grows. In 2012, 67 years after Iwo Jima, Congress awards the Congressional Gold Medal to the Montford Point Marines. 300 men attend the ceremony in Washington. They're old now, in their 80s and 90s. Many arrive in wheelchairs. Some clutch photographs of brothers who didn't survive. President Barack Obama's statement is simple. You served in a country not always willing to see your dignity. But you helped it see its ideals. Iwo Jima became more than a battle. It became proof. Undeniable, irrefutable proof that the premises of segregation were lies. That courage required no particular skin color. That excellence under pressure was human, not racial. The island's volcanic black sand absorbed the blood of men who demanded to be seen as equals. And slowly, painfully, America began to see. But the cost was measured in bodies and broken promises, in medals earned and respect delayed, in heroism performed and humanity denied. The final question remained, what did it all mean? There is a photograph from Iwo Jima that never made the papers. It shows 3 Marines resting behind a disabled tank. 2 are white, 1 is black. Their uniforms are identical. Their exhaustion is identical. The volcanic ash coating their faces makes them nearly indistinguishable. In that moment, captured by an anonymous photographer, the lie of segregation is exposed. War has a way of revealing truth. The black Marines who stormed Iwo Jima fought 2 enemies. One wore a uniform and defended tunnels carved into volcanic rock. The other wore no uniform but was equally real, the systematic doubt that had followed them from birth. The belief that their courage was lesser, their endurance weaker, their humanity conditional. They defeated both. The victory over Japan came with flags and parades. The victory over American racism came slower, harder, and remains incomplete. Executive Order 9981 desegregated the military, but not the nation. Black veterans returned to Jim Crow laws and lynch mobs. They had proven themselves on the world's deadliest battlefield, yet still couldn't vote in Mississippi or eat at lunch counters in Alabama. But something had shifted. A crack had formed in the foundation of segregation. The Montford Point Marines had forced America to confront a question it preferred to ignore. How can you deny equality to men who died defending it? The answer ultimately was, you can't. Not forever. Not honestly. Iwo Jima became a reference point for the civil rights movement. When activists demanded integration, they pointed to battlefields where it had already succeeded. When politicians claimed black Americans weren't ready for equality, veterans held up their medals and asked, ready for what, exactly? We were ready to die. The island itself remains. Mount Suribachi still rises against the Pacific sky. The beaches are quiet now. Tourists walking where men once fell. The black volcanic sand has been washed by 70 years of tides, but if you dig deep enough, you still find shell casings, rusted metal, and bone fragments too small to identify. The Japanese were wrong. The Black Marines were not weak points to exploit. They were proof of something the enemy never understood, that oppression can forge strength, that doubt can fuel determination, and that men fighting for an imperfect country can still fight for a perfect ideal. The Montford Point Marines earned the title they were grudgingly given. They wore the uniform they had to demand the right to wear. They proved what should never have required proving, that courage, honor, and sacrifice recognize no color. On a volcanic island in the Pacific between one war and another, they fought for a nation that questioned their worth, and they never questioned their own.